This week in the Pentagon, on the heels of his recent trip through the Middle East, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff urges Pakistan to do more to secure its borders.
We're seeing a greater number of insurgents and foreign fighters flowing across the border with Pakistan, unmolested and unhindered.
Plus, one of the greatest murder mysteries of the 20th century has been solved thanks to the efforts of the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology.
This is a homicide, and this is, from that perspective, children died, and so it's important to have closure to this case.
Plus,
your government travel card is changing. I'll tell you when.
And a preview of the military's Olympic athletes.
We train real hard to do this, and this is one of our first missions, to get medals in the Olympic Games.
Welcome to This Week in the Pentagon. I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. We're midway through summer, halfway through what the Defense Department calls the 101 critical days of summer. It's the period between Memorial Day and Labor Day that sees more off-duty accidents than any other time of year. According to DoD, so far, 50 service members have died in off-duty accidents since May 23rd. The number one cause is vehicle accidents, mostly motorcycles. The warm weather, the rising cost of gas, the allure of the open road. Motorcycles are popular, and they're a growing trend among service members. But also on the rise, motorcycle accidents. The DoD's stats show that out of 37 service members who've died in vehicle accidents since Memorial Day, 25 have been on motorcycles. That's 25 deaths in less than 2 months from one thing. Later in the show, we'll take a closer look at the statistics and what the Department of Defense is doing to stop service members from dying on motorcycles. But first, the Secretary of Defense recommends a new chief of the National Guard. In other news this week in the Pentagon. Wednesday, July 16th, Defense Secretary Robert Gates and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Michael Mullen, told reporters there's increasing concern over the flow of insurgents and foreign fighters along Afghanistan's border with Pakistan.
This movement needs to stop. We simply must all do a better job of policing the border region and eliminating the safe havens which serve today as launching pads for attacks on coalition forces.
Do you intend to send more forces in the near term to Afghanistan, either ground forces or air forces?
I think that we are clearly working very hard to see if there are opportunities to send additional forces sooner rather than later. No decisions have been made, no recommendations have been made.
Both Secretary Gates and Admiral Mullen say the enemy in Afghanistan has grown bolder, more sophisticated, and more diverse. Defense leaders will continue to insist that the new Pakistani government do more to police its side of the border to stop combat extremists. In the same briefing, Secretary Gates also announced his recommendation of Air Force Lieutenant General Craig McKinley as Chief of the National Guard Bureau. General McKinley will be nominated for a 4th star and to the rank of full general, a first for a National Guard officer.
The elevation of the National Guard Chief to 4 stars recognizes the enhanced importance of the Guard to America's overall national defense.
General McKinley will replace Lieutenant General Stephen Blum, who Secretary Gates nominated to become the first Guard Deputy Commander of Northern Command, also an historic first. And the military surge in Iraq is over. The last of the 5 brigades, the 3rd Infantry Division 2nd Brigade, has left the country. The surge, which began back in January of 2007, is credited with dramatically decreasing violent attacks in Iraq. The colonel who took the lead in correcting problems at Walter Reed Army Medical Center is pulling up stakes. She also got a promotion. Major General Patricia Harajo is leaving the hospital command to run the Army Nurse Corps. The Pentagon Channel sat down to talk with her on her last day.
The Major General jumps 2 ranks, while her family, the Secretary of the Army, and the Army Surgeon General look on.
You can't even put it into words. I mean, truly, and I use the word humbling, and it just seems inadequate.
It's a long way from where she started as a lieutenant nurse at Fort Carson.
Everything in life is a building block, and you think if you didn't have this experience, you would have never had the skill set to manage whatever is being presented.
For her master's degree, she chose to study burns. Before long, she was working as head nurse in the ER at Womack Army Hospital when an F-16 crashed into a C-141, killing more than 20.
500 soldiers on the ground and 134 burn victims that came to Fort Bragg. Had I not had the experience with my master's, I wouldn't have had the burn background preparation.
The Major General deployed to Haiti as part of a health facility assessment team. It was there she learned important lessons that would guide her as she set up a makeshift triage area outside the Pentagon on 9/11.
I said, well, we'll need porta potties, we'll need water, we'll need tents, we'll need shelters. So they activated the military district of Washington to get comms and everything that we needed. And I thought, I'm not sure I would have known to even ask for that had it not been for the Haiti experience. And
she was honored for her life-saving performance in the midst of chaos that day. And it was that chaos which prepared her for the firestorm that would be hers to manage when scandal broke out at Walter Reed.
This has truly been the most challenging environment I've ever worked in.
The first woman, the first nurse to command Walter Reed's healthcare system. She credits teams of employees at the hospital for sticking it out when times got tough and seeing opportunities for change. Among her initiatives, Warrior Transition Brigades with dedicated case managers to supervise patient care, state-of-the-art evacuation vehicles, better air evacuation facilities, and family care, a new medical tracking system, even Disney training for staff. Patient compliments have risen from 100 per month to more than 600.
It's amazing. I haven't had any problems. They take really good care of me.
All of that in just over a year.
People that work here are probably the most dedicated that I've seen in my entire career.
And she says behind every successful woman is a supportive colonel. 3 children aged 21, 15, and 14. Her 83-year-old dad, 79-year-old mom, all who live at home.
The support that I've had from all of them to be able to work the long hours that I've done here, they're also what keep me balanced in life. They keep you humble, they do, and they keep you on track.
Homework, perhaps in preparation for her next assignment. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Petty Officer Jay Mann.
Plane tickets, hotels, and meals, they all have one thing in common. The government travel card can be used to purchase each one. But as Master Sergeant Aaron Roberts reports, this November, you'll see some changes to the card.
The travel card is changing, only its name though. Everything else pretty much stays the same.
After 10 years, our contract with the Bank of America is ending, and on November 30th, all of our cardholders in DOD will be using new travel cards issued by Citi.
How are you doing, sir?
Good. I need to check in.
Okay. I see your ID card as well, please, sir. Thank you very much. You're going to be using your government travel card today?
Yep.
The new Citi travel cards will be used exactly as the current travel cards, and they should be arriving in your mailbox beginning next month.
They need to call the number on the card and verify receipt of the card. That's important for us because we and Citi need to know who received a card.
The important thing to remember is don't throw away your old card. Put the new one in a safe place and continue to use your current government travel card until 11:59 p.m. on November 29th. On November 30th at 12 a.m., the new travel card will be activated. But there is one thing you can do now to help ensure your future travel plans are successful.
One other thing that card holders need to do right now is they need to ensure that their address and all the information about them is correct in the current Bank of America system, because the Bank of America files are being transferred to Citi, and Citi will be using those files to cut the new cards and to mail them out.
There are sure to be questions about the new government travel card, so you can go to defensetravel.dod.mil for more information. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Air Force Master Sergeant Aaron Roberts.
If you haven't received your new Citi government travel card by October 31st, contact your agency program coordinator at your duty location. Military deaths on motorcycles are on the rise. Coming up, we'll take a look at the trend. Welcome back to This Week in the Pentagon. The beautiful warm weather of summertime means many service members are heading outdoors during their off-duty hours. But there's a major downside to that, says the Defense Department. With the nice weather comes more accidents, the most coming from motorcycles. Here's a closer look at the statistics. On the popular video sharing site YouTube, the video quality can be low, but the message still comes across clear. Motorcycles are dangerous. But there's no denying that motorcycle riding is becoming more popular among service members. Officials cite high gas prices and money made from deployments as two of the reasons. As summer reaches its midpoint, DoD officials released numbers that show since Memorial Day, 50 service members have died in off-duty accidents. 37 of those deaths were in motor vehicles, and more sobering, 25 of those 37 service members were killed on motorcycles. Memorial Day marks the beginning of what DoD calls the 101 critical days of summer, when service members traditionally spend more of their off-duty time outdoors. It's also a period where officials say they see more accidents. Videos like this one, available at the Air Force Safety Office's website, address the issue of car and motorcycle accidents, touching on points like wearing proper protective clothing and not drinking and driving. But DoD says motor vehicle accidents remain the #1 cause of off-duty deaths. According to a safety message from Defense Secretary Robert Gates, last year 77 service members were killed in off-duty vehicle accidents during the 101 days. DoD is addressing the issue of motorcycle deaths and has been for some time. One way is through hands-on training. Every service member who wants to ride must complete a motorcycle safety foundation course similar to the one taught at Fort Belvoir, Virginia.
I started riding when I was 18, but I had a break in the riding, and then I guess about 9 years ago, came back to street riding, and took the basic rider course myself, and was very impressed by it. So I thought, someday I'd like to be an instructor in that, because I learned how little I knew from my early riding days. Questions on path of travel or technique? Patrick Gallagher, lead instructor, motorcycle safety. On this side, try to look further ahead. Okay, use your peripheral vision on this side. I guess I'd describe myself as a rider in the early days as untrained, reckless, young. Like I was 18. My brother-in-law said first gear is down, the rest of the gears are up. That was my total training. So I'm lucky to be alive today. Yeah. Rock on, rock star. I'm all right. Way to go. Recently, there's been a rise in the number of motorcycle accidents, and certainly motorcycle fatalities around the Army and the other services. I believe have experienced the same thing. And in one sense, it doesn't surprise me, because there's been an increase in the number of people who are riding motorcycles.
My truck went from $40 a week in gas to over $120 a week in gas. This bike, I put $12 in a week.
It seems the rise in the number of crashes and fatalities is due to a number of things. There's no one factor they can pinpoint, no one age group. In the military, it seems to be more folks that are involved. Certainly fatal crashes involve riding sport bikes. And I think a lot of it has to do with, you've got a high-powered machine, and folks don't have a lot of experience handling that type of a bike. I'm happy to see that the Army and other services are taking motorcycle safety seriously. Okay, so as you're coming towards us, we're just going to remind you to slow with both brakes and look. Okay, remember, it's slow, look, press, roll. So that'll be the coaching we're going to be doing on the range. I just think it's great to have the motorcycle safety courses available so that people keep their mental side of motorcycling just as in tune as their physical side.
I want to say that, if people go out there to just enjoy themselves, I think they ought to just use more cautions. Speed will kill you.
You know, I have had friends that have crashed, and I always try to take something away from it, you know, a lesson learned, so that, you know, I can avoid, you know, crashing myself. Yeah, plus just working on balance, clutch control, keeping your head and eyes looking forward. Be a lifelong learner, especially if you were taught by a brother-in-law like I was. Nothing against my brother-in-law, great guy, but, you know, just he gave me very little information to go on, and so a lot of it was self-taught, and I found out later I had taught myself a lot of the wrong things. So, you know, take the basic rider course. Once you've taken that, take the experienced rider course continually, every year if you have the opportunity. And then, you know, the military just is, with the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, has come out with a military sport bike course. If you ride a sport bike, that's another one to add to your list, because there's, you know, some great life-saving tips that are available and techniques that you can use to you know, improve your chances of surviving on the road and living to be an old rider.
July 15th marked the official end of a 2-year mission for the National Guard supporting security efforts along the nation's southern border. Petty Officer Liz Murray reports on the successful partnering of Guard units, U.S. Customs, and Border Protection.
It began in 2006 as Operation Jumpstart, with National Guard assets deployed along the U.S.-Mexico border. They were part of a 2-year effort to bolster the security mission provided by U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Up to 6,000 Guard troops supported Border Control agents on a variety of missions that first year. July 2008 marks the end of the Guard effort to reinforce America's borders. National Guard and Border Patrol officials were together in Washington to thank Guard troops for a job well done.
I had no doubt in the beginning that if you take two competent, committed, disciplined, professional organizations like the U.S. Border Patrol and the National Guard, and you put them together and you tell them that you need them to work together to accomplish a task, it wasn't a big surprise to me that we could make it work.
Officials credit Guard troops for a variety of support roles, and along the way, assisting in more than 170,000 alien apprehensions.
Most of the time, when we are employed, it's in support of the interagency that has the core competencies and the legal authorities, particularly in our country, here in our homeland, to be responsible for enforcing the law and protecting the United States. Where Department of Defense can help, and the Guard being part of the Department of Defense can play a role in that, is very, very important.
In the end, the greatest benefit to the country has been a safer and more secure border. But as it relates to the organizations, I think we both learned from each other. We learned how to better coordinate and make our borders safer.
Guard and Border Patrol leaders say lessons learned from Jumpstart will make it easier to ramp up similar interagency missions in the future. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Petty Officer Liz Murray.
Still ahead, a 90-year-old mystery solved. Welcome back to our program. A 90-year-old mystery that stirred controversy, fraud, and at its start was pivotal in determining the destiny of one country and possibly the world has been solved. The detectives, the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, the crime, the murder of Russia's last Tsar and his family. The mystery, 2 missing children.
January 22nd.
St. Petersburg, Russia, in the early 1900s. After nearly 300 years of Romanov rule, war, and a population starved for better jobs and food, threw Russia's last Tsar into a revolution. But Tsar Nicholas Romanov, the third richest person in history, seemed impervious. Hundreds lost their lives in protests and demonstrations. In the end, the Tsar, along with his wife Alexandra and 5 children, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, and their only son Alexei, were placed under house arrest, essentially imprisoned in Ekaterinburg. In the early morning hours of July 17, 1918, the family was called to the basement to pose for a family photo. Instead, they were executed.
Mad chaos ensued because apparently for the girls in their corsets, they had sewn diamonds and jewels into the corsets, and so their clothing was acting as like a bulletproof vest. So the bullets were bouncing off of them, and so the executioners had to then resort to bayonets, and so it was a very gruesome scene.
Then the Bolsheviks ran into even more problems trying to dispose of the bodies.
As they left this site, their truck broke down only a few miles outside of the mine shaft. They very hastily decided, we'll try to destroy the bodies as much as we can and bury them here where the truck broke down.
The executioners, using gasoline, fire, and sulfuric acid, did the best they could to destroy 2 of the bodies, but the others they simply buried nearby. That's why there were 2 graves. One, containing 9 bodies, was discovered in 1979, but kept under wraps until the mid-90s when President Boris Yeltsin allowed geologists to go public. The other grave went undiscovered, feeding rumors that 2 of the children, Alexei, heir to the throne, and Maria, had possibly survived.
This is probably one of the most important historical cases ever. With the fall of the Romanovs ushered in communism and the Soviet Union, which completely altered, the history, global history.
Then, last summer, the second Romanov grave was unearthed.
This is a homicide, and this is, from that perspective, children died, and so it's important to have closure to this case.
So these funny-looking tubes are actually the extracts from 2 of the skeletal remains from the Romanov case.
The Armed Forces Institute of Pathology became involved in the identification process at the request of the Russian government because of AFIP's experience in testing ancient remains. Thanks to the Bolsheviks' effort to hide their crime, these remains were pulverized.
There's probably so little mitochondrial DNA left in some of these samples, so you have to concentrate the volume down.
So this is a sample of the leg bone, a thigh bone that we received from the lab there in Ekaterinburg at this second grave. When we did the mitochondrial DNA sequence from this sample, we found it matches the same sequence that you would expect to find from the Tsarina.
But the nuclear DNA, which is unique to each individual, was even more revealing. The 2 samples shared similar STRs, or short tandem repeats.
So what this is telling us is that it's over 1 million times more likely that these 2 individuals are siblings than they're just 2 random people.
Finally, patterns in the boy's DNA were a match to his father's, Tsar Nicholas. Scientists called the evidence overwhelming.
What we know now is that night, July 17th, 18th, that the family was completely executed. No one survived.
A mystery solved and a family reunited. In just over 2 weeks, the 2008 Olympic Games are set to begin in Beijing, China. This year, a handful of the athletes set to compete are service members. Here's a preview of one of those competitors in the sport of Greco-Roman wrestling. Meet Army Staff Sergeant Dramel Byers. He's a part of the Army's world-class athlete program at Fort Carson, Colorado, which encourages and supports talented athletes while they maintain their military careers. Weighing in at more than 240 pounds, Sergeant Byers has hopes of bringing home his own Olympic gold.
It's a tremendous honor. It makes me feel extremely proud. A lot of people have been in support of what we do here. I'm a member of the Army's world-class athlete program, and we train real hard to do this, and this is one of our first missions, to get medals in the Olympic Games. So I'm just honored to be the one to represent our country and our branch.
On August 1st, we'll have a special Olympic edition of This Week in the Pentagon, which will include profiles of a few of the military athletes set to compete. On to another type of sport, baseball. The All-Star Game was held this week at Yankee Stadium in New York, where baseball was on everyone's mind, but service members were in the heart.
My name is Derek Jeter of the New York Yankees. I just want to thank you guys for all that you've done.
Big salute to all the troops. You guys are real superstars. We wish you were here in All-Star Weekend in New York City enjoying the great celebration of the game. You guys are true heroes. Thank you very much and enjoy.
The 2008 All-Star Game is now a part of Yankee Stadium history, and a long history it is. Don Larson threw a perfect game in the 1956 World Series here. Roger Maris hit his 61st home run in 1961 here. Reggie Jackson hit 3 home runs in one game in the 1977 World Series, again, right here. But the lure of this stadium is not just about baseball. The New York Football Giants lost the 1958 NFL title game to the Baltimore Colts in what has been called the greatest game ever played, and many people attribute the popularity of the NFL today directly back to that game. Joe Louis knocked out Max Schnelling in 1938 here in a moment that just transcended sports amid political tensions leading up to World War II. And Major League Baseball can be considered an organization that transcends sports. Bud Selig, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, announced just this year the formation of an organization called Welcome Back Veterans. The charter of this organization: help wounded warriors return home and repair their lives.
Our goals, frankly, are to provide as much as we possibly can and lead the way to honor and take care of the veterans who have done so much, and we will do that too in a myriad of ways in the coming months.
They say the ghosts of the New York Yankees' historic past walk the halls of this stadium, and just as they're about to close one chapter of their history and open another when they begin playing across the street next summer, the Department of Defense is determined to exercise some of their own ghosts. Secretary of Defense Robert Gates has been very candid in his remarks when he says more must be done for America's wounded heroes. And this collaboration between the DoD, Veterans Affairs, and Major League Baseball is a good step in the right direction.
This ball is gone.
Reporting from the 2008 All-Star Game in Yankee Stadium, I'm Air Force Master Sergeant George Maurer.
That's our show this week. We want to thank everyone involved for their contributions. Please be sure to tune in and join us again next week as we examine some of the top news stories surrounding the Department of Defense. For This Week in the Pentagon, I'm Sergeant Brian Buckwalter. Thanks for watching. We leave you now with these images from a recent weapons cache discovery in Iraq.